Hello guys, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be playing with this Dell Precision Tower 3420 that I bought off eBay for $55. It was listed as 4 parts are not working, but I have a sneaky suspicion that it is, in fact, not broken at all. I believe this because the last photo in the listing showed it displaying to a monitor the standard "no media detected" text that any system will output when it doesn't find a bootable media. They said it had no HDD, so the lack of bootable media made sense to me. Another important green flag for me was that their seller page didn't seem to specialize in any specific stuff. They clearly weren't someone to deal with computers often and probably hadn't tried to fix it or anything at this point, so it was highly likely that the only thing that was actually wrong with it was the lack of a hard drive with Windows 10. For $55 after shipping, it sure wasn't the greatest deal of all time, even if it was functional, but it'll hopefully be fun to play with and maybe make a cool video. It was listed as having a Core i5 6500, 4 gigs of RAM, and no hard drive. However, I later found out that the eBay seller had got the RAM amount incorrect. Instead of only 4 gigs, it actually had 8, and this was a really nice surprise and makes the computer a lot more appealing. The first thing to do was to open up the system and just check that nothing was obviously wrong in there. Just a quick check to make sure that nothing came loose in shipping and that we aren't missing anything like memory or a CMOS battery. Here's a little tip for you when you open some of these Dell Precision Towers. That back panel where all the ventilation cutouts are is loaded with abnormally sharp edges. When popping the panel off, don't hinge your fingers on your knuckles, as you risk doing what I did and shaving a bit of skin off your finger. Instead, put your fingers under the handle and place your thumb on the back panel like this and push with your thumb to pop off the top panel. This way you're much less likely to get cut. Now that I'm inside this computer, I can see that all our SATA power and data cables are unplugged. This system wasn't spec'd out with a DVD drive, so those cables won't be plugged in anywhere, and the cables for a hard drive aren't plugged in because there is no hard drive in the system. Nothing seems wrong here though, so I can put everything back together and try to get the system to boot up to that no media detected screen. And there we go. No hard drive or optical drive found. Sounds about right considering there aren't any in there. Now let's check the BIOS to make sure everything seems to be working right in there, and then we can get on to putting a new drive in. The system information section in the BIOS shows that we have 8 gigs of RAM and our Intel Core i5 6500. Everything seems to be in perfect working order, minus the lack of a boot drive, but that's a super easy fix for us. So I shut down the system and prepared to get it all set up for a new fresh install of Windows 10 Pro. Firstly, however, I had been noticing a bit of an interesting looking expansion card in the system, and it showed up as a communication device in the BIOS. I took a look at it and quickly realized it was a PCIe to parallel port card. I had never seen one of these specific cards, ever, and I've seen countless parallel ports on older computer motherboards, but never a card that adds one to a modern computer, as almost no household appliance uses them except really old printers. I have no idea what the original owner of this computer was using this thing for, and I have no way to test it, but I'll be removing it from the computer as it's unnecessary to have in here, unless, of course, you have a hyper-specific use case for it, which, let's be honest, almost no one does. I also noticed in the BIOS, and while prodding around in the computer just taking a look at what it had in it, it had an M.2 slot. I have a spare M.2 SSD that I pulled from a family member's laptop when we upgraded their SSD that I can use here as a boot drive if this slot can be booted from. It's a 512 gig drive from Micron with plenty of life left on it. I gave it a secure wipe so it's nice and clean for its next use case. I would like to note, really quickly, that I know I've said not to use used storage in computers. Seems hypocritical now that I'm doing this, right? Yeah, I should clarify what I mean. I mean that I never recommend going out and buying used storage drives where you have no clue about the life that they used to live. Some old hard drives may have tens of thousands of power on hours and may be on their way out. Some SSDs might have had all their endurance used up. Who knows? I know that this drive had a good life, and its smart data tells me that it's got plenty of time left in it to continue being a boot drive for someone else's computer. And hey, if you're buying a computer that's listed as used, getting used storage is entirely fair. With our new to this computer drive installed and the computer reassembled, it's time to boot into an install media and get Windows started on its install process. I'll skip through this process as I've done it on here a few times before, but it's worth noting that this is one of the computers that did not prompt me for a product key because the product key was already saved to its BIOS and the installer recognized it. I did all the updates in audit mode and started to run Cinebench when I realized I had forgotten to repaste the CPU like I always do. I shut down the system, did a quick repaste. Here's a little look at our i5 6500. And got back to testing. I ran Cinebench, no issues there, and the temps were actually impressively good considering the super low fan speed and relatively small cooler on this one. It's actually somewhat efficient. Also, if anyone's interested, in multi-core it scored about 3,400 points with Hardware Info 64 running as well. I then chose to do something that I don't usually do but may start doing more often. I ran a quick crystal disk mark test to ensure that the SSD was capable of doing the speeds it should. This one passed with flying colors, about 3 gigabytes per second each way. With all that done, this computer is ready to be sold off to a new owner. It was quite a relief to see that the system did function as I thought it would, and if it didn't and it had some kind of weird issue, this could have turned into a what can we salvage from my poor investment video, and thankfully that didn't happen. In any case, I hope that you enjoyed today's video and maybe even learned something. I hope to see you all next time. Goodbye.